I don't have to do anything, right? You'll just hit record. Yeah, awesome.
Today's guest is Steve Rio. Steve is the co-founder of Enfold, offering elevated, safe, and sacred retreats in BC, Canada. Steve is a psychedelic guide, performance and transformation coach, a musician, and a successful entrepreneur and investor. His work focuses on raising consciousness and helping people realize their full potential. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thanks, Ally. It's a pleasure to be here.
I was just saying before we pressed record that you and I have never met, and you're actually the first guest I've had that I don't know personally, but I feel like our circles have crossed in, so many ways. We know probably like a million of the same people. But I'm really excited to talk to you today for so many different reasons. But one is that psychedelics are near and dear to my heart, and I've never really spoken publicly about my own experiences, and specifically with 5-MeO-DMT, which is your world. So I'd first love to hear in your own words the work you do and the work you do with this medicine, with this molecule.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's hard to describe our work. There's so many layers to it, but my wife and I have been doing this work for the past, professionally, I guess, for the past five years. And essentially we do three things. We host intensives or retreats. We call them intensives these days because really our work is about leaning into life, moving towards life, not retreating. So it's an interesting, so it's partly that. So we do intensives, which is kind of a core aspect of our work. I do a lot of coaching, and my wife does coaching on her own as well. So coaching, like longer form work around helping people work through attachment trauma or work through healing or work through expansion. A lot of the folks I work with are in transitions in their life where they've been really successful. And now they're asking the question, like the broader questions about what this life is really about and what their true purpose is. And then we do a lot of work around building community. And really, to me, the long tail of our work is about building a community, because for us, what we see is that the biggest healing happens in community. It happens in group settings. It happens in the connections that are made, in feeling more connected to the fabric of life. And so that's been a big aspect of our work too. Our work happens out of our property on Bowen Island, which is a little island outside of Vancouver. And it's been quite the journey. Yeah.
I bet. And I love this idea of you're not retreating, you're actually sort of going toward or meeting what is here. And so what do the intensives entail? I know they're between 3 and 5 days. Someone shows up, but even let's back up, because there's a bit of a screening process. So who are these intensives for?
Yeah, I would say these intensives are for anyone who has, we're not the first stop on someone's spiritual or healing journey. Enfold is really, like, our work is fairly intensive, no pun intended, I guess, but it's a fairly intensive process. We work with 5-MeO-DMT, which is one of the strongest substances on the planet. And I would say that we're really for anyone who is at a point where they have done spiritual discovery or personal healing work, whether that's therapy or coaching, or it could be faith-based work, or it could be psychedelics. There's a lot of different, could be a meditation or mindfulness path, but you're really at a place where you're ready to go deeper. You're ready to really take a deeply honest look at who you are, how you're showing up, what you really want in this life. And we talk about our work as a remembering, and part of it is remembering who we actually are and going through an awakening process, which is often a fairly challenging process for people. It's often described, there's a lot of video online about 5-MeO being this blissful white light experience, but it's definitely not always like that. In fact, it's quite commonly not like that. And I would say that our work, it centers around, we think of it as looking at the major systems that affect how we show up in the world. And that's our nervous system. So a lot of our work is focused on the nervous system, our personality system. So how we perceive the world, what our conditioning is like, the different aspects of who we think we are. And that's where attachment style and IFS comes in, and coaching and more therapeutic techniques. And then the spiritual system. So what is our connection to something broader than ourselves? What is our purpose in this life? What is our meaning? What are our values? That's what we think of as our spiritual system. And our retreats or our intensives or whatever the heck we're going to call them for the next little bit. There's a screening process. There is, and really that's just to make sure that somebody has done enough work to be at a place where it makes sense for them to show up here. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've done a ton of psychedelic work. Some people have done no psychedelic work, but they've done a lot of other work, to uncover sort of core blockages and core aspects of their personality system and things like that. But we kind of screen people, and then we have a whole preparation process that we take people through, an intake process to get a real proper download of their backstory and their life. We do some prep calls, both personally and in group. We have a prep program that people go through online. That's a bunch of different reflections and practices. So breath work, movement, different somatic practices and meditative practices. And then the retreat itself is really a combination of group work, somatic therapy, psychedelics like 5-MeO-DMT. We work with another substance called 3-MMC, which is sort of like MDMA a little bit, but a little bit more clear-minded, really beautiful medicine for unpacking things and really getting deep into what we're thinking and what we believe. And really at the root of all of it is helping people discover that they are full of an abundant love and helping them reconnect with their body, with the present moment, with love, with safety, so that they can then start, working on the major things in their life that are maybe not serving them, or maybe expanding into the areas of their life that they've been waiting to do that. So, yeah.
So cool. I love how integrative the whole process is, because I think what's missing a lot in the psychedelic community is the integration, is the preparation and the integration. Yeah. And I just left LA. I was in LA for 3.5 years, and there's it's the epicenter of so many of these things. And totally. I was seeing a lot of almost like maybe it's the wrong word, but for lack of a better term, addiction to ceremony.
Oh, totally.
Just going in and going in and going in. And, I still feel like I'm processing the last time I did 5-MeO-DMT, which was a 1.5 years ago. I still am processing,
absolutely,
ayahuasca from 2 years ago, and the integration process. So I love the work that you and your wife are doing. And I'm curious when you found, when you found 5-MeO, or when it found you, how many years ago, where were you at in your life, and what was that experience like for you to sort of set off this ripple effect where you now serve the medicine and help people through the experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. First of all, I just really appreciate you saying that you're still integrating your 5-MeO experience from 1.5 years ago. We say that to our guests all the time, that this is going to be a process that you're entering into, that it often lasts 12 months, that you don't really know what's happened until at least 1 year. And like that things just keep unfolding, and there's all these layers, and it's hard for people to grasp. And so people often start to feel uncomfortable in that process, and then they want to jump back in for more ceremony. They want more medicine, more substances, more psychedelics. And like, that's often just more dysregulating than it is helpful. And so much of the other work that we do in our daily practice, in learning to slow things down and learning to integrate into our regular lives, that's actually the meaningful work. So I didn't even talk about all the preparation stuff we do, but that to us that's where community comes in. That's where a lot of the daily practice stuff comes in. So I just love that. But we were first brought to this medicine about I think 7 years ago. So I'd say the whole story is that we're living downtown Vancouver. We had different types of companies at that time. Both my wife and I were entrepreneurs with our own companies. We moved to Bowen Island, to this property. Our original plan was to renovate it and to move to New York. We were going to renovate it, make a little suite for ourselves, rent most of it out, and then move to New York, where I was going to jump back into my business that I kind of stepped away from and grow it a lot faster. And the first night we were here, we had this conversation about hosting psychedelic journeys here, and that was 8 years ago. And it was like we hadn't Austin and I have been working with psychedelics for 25 years each, basically, for a long time. But we hadn't really worked with psychedelics together. We had never really talked about them as a couple, actually. We had been in this phase of raising our daughter, who was a teenager, and it was my wife's daughter that I adopted. And we were kind of like in this funny adulting phase. I don't know. But we didn't talk about psychedelics. And then the first night we got here, we thought, oh, maybe we could host psychedelic experiences. And that wasn't the plan at all. But over that summer, that conversation blossomed and evolved. And it became very abundantly clear that we are not going to move to New York. We're going to learn to, we're going to start farming a little bit, and we're going to be more with the land. And our whole lives started to shift. So that was the first shift. And then the next year, a friend had kept just saying, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this. And finally we did. And it was there. I just describe it as a before and after moment in my life, one of those very clear. I really can only think of a few of those. Like one was my wedding, one was that moment. And it was very, very, very powerful. And it was also an interesting learning experience, because some of the friends we had with us who also had that experience that day really had a very challenging experience. And there was no prep or integration attached to what we did. It was just like a show up and do it and then leave type thing.
Yeah.
And so we kind of scooped our friends up and we brought them back to our place, and we did some integration, and we just made dinner. Austin and I have a pretty big history of psychedelics, of meditation, silent retreats, like a lot of introspective work. So for us, this was a huge experience, but we kind of hold it, And for the others, a couple of them, it was like really disorienting. And so it kind of made us start thinking, well, that's interesting. This is such a beautiful experience, and what a power, like this medicine aligned with so many of our core ways we think about spirituality. It was so direct and so simple and so somatic and so clear. And so it just really connected with us on a very deep level. And another part of us thought, well, that was interesting. That was so powerful, but nobody gave us any preparation for that. No one's checked in on us. I was there for about an hour and a half, and then I was asked to move my car. I think I've told the story on other podcasts, but I had stripped my clothes off. I was naked on a deck looking at the ocean, and having like a very hippied out moment for a second there. And that's when somebody was tapping me on the shoulder going, yeah, we need you to move your car. The next people are here. And so
was this in Vancouver, or where was this?
It actually was on Bowen Island. It was like in a rented cabin. Yep. So it was kind of random. But anyway, and then we had another experience after that felt, again, like we thought it was supposed to be a real learning opportunity, and it turned out to be a really chaotic experience with some pretty serious lack of safety. And it just showed us this medicine, has a lot going for it, and it actually needs some lineage built around it. It needs some, it just needs adults in the room, I think, and needs some more thoughtfulness around it. Because you see a lot of that 5-MeO is so easy to serve. So there's so many people who are like, come on over and smoke 5-MeO. And it feels easy to people because it's like you can do it in an hour.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like brain surgery. It's got to be treated with such delicacy and such sensitivity. And I just think that's really being missed by a lot of people. So that's a big part of our work, is also advocacy and education, and trying to set standards and being like a role model for how to think about this medicine and hold space for it in a way as it gains popularity.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm so grateful that the two of you are doing that work. And I have heard like truly horror stories about this medicine being served in really unsafe ways, really unethical. And really, and the first time I came upon the medicine, I actually went to someone's ceremony. A friend had asked me, hey, will you come sit with me? And he had done the medicine once before, and was supporting ceremonies, this really beautiful place in Malibu. And I said, sure. And he said, I'm really peaceful. All I do is I lay back, and it's a really peaceful time. And I said, sure. second time he does the medicine, so the first time I'm there with him, it was not so peaceful for him, and similar to your experience,
Yeah.
writhing and shirts coming off and a lot of screaming. And I thought, okay, well, wasn't prepared for this.
Yeah.
And but it was beautiful to witness, but it was very intense, and sort of as he sort of softened and kind of laid back and sort of dissolved into God consciousness, it was like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the people that were leading it said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, that was so the most beautiful thing I've seen. What a beautiful thing to witness with my friend. And they said, well, if you want to go, you can go. And
Yeah.
I just said, okay. And so, I mean,
Oh, wow.
the only preparation was me witnessing, and then I was, all of a sudden I was saying a prayer and doing the thing. So it kind of came upon me in a very quick and fast way. I didn't really know anything about it until I was until it was my quote unquote term. But I had a lot of support after, and I love what you said. And I've heard you say this in another podcast about this isn't necessarily a beginner's situation. I felt so grateful that I had been a meditator for 17 years and a yoga teacher and have a breathwork practice and had done many psychedelics before, because this one kind of feels like the final boss in many ways.
Yeah.
And so I don't actually, just so we're clear, I don't actually like recommend it for people unless they really have some sort of experience in sort of all those pathways, be it meditation or psychedelics, because and I think what people don't know maybe about 5-MeO is that it's not the sort of same narrative maybe as ayahuasca or doing mushrooms, and looking at your family trauma. It doesn't have a similar narrative. For so many of us, it's just like an ego death, and then for me it felt like picking up the pieces and integrating over the last year and a half since the last time I did it. So can you explain sort of a little bit more about what the experience is actually like? It's so ineffable, but I'm curious if you can kind of put words to it.
So the first thing to note is that just it's what it's actually like is totally different for everybody. What they experience is so different, and it ranges from sheer terror to total bliss, and often a range of all of it in between. So that part is like, you really can't describe what it feels like, so I won't bother too much. But I think the main thing to know that what this medicine is doing, and depending on how you do it, some people go and just do a single dose. Like when you did it, was it just a single big dose?
A single big dose. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people are doing this kind of single big dose thing, and then we take a titrated approach, which means that we start at a low dose and we work our way up to a higher dose. So we're kind of easing your system in to the full experience. And but either way, what we're doing over the course of multiple doses is slowly dissolving the mind, and we're slowly dissolving the ego to a place where there is this ego death, so-called ego death. Is basically, it's like a disillusion of yourself, and you are completely offline. There is no you having the experience. And then within a few minutes, which sometimes feels like an eternity, some people feel like they're trapped in a loop of dying forever. And then they're coming back from that. Just like, to be totally honest, like that's sometimes how it feels for people.
Totally.
And sometimes
I'm
it
laughing
feels like,
because I know it's true.
and some people feel like they're in a total bliss state for forever, and it can be a lot of things. But then your mind quite quickly starts to come back online, and you start to have your first awarenesses of self again, and this sort of very intense experience you're coming out of. And so there's sort of two things happening here. One is, so when we titrate up, what we're experiencing is we start to really feel the tension of our ego or our conditioning, like the egoic mind, and we just notice how hard it's hanging on to reality as we know it, right? So you feel the tension of that. A lot of people are just wrestling with letting, this idea of letting go is very complicated. Everybody says, just let go, just relax. And this shows you just how hard it is to do that. I kind of think of the 5-MeO experience as this microcosm of our entire life. It's like taking our 100 years or 80 years or however long we get and pushing it into an hour or two or 20 minutes if you just do a single dose. And so you get to experience all of the ways you hold, all of the stories you tell. Like it's just this blast of your mind as your mind is sort of being wrestled into submission. And then when we go completely offline, that's where we see this massive shift in the nervous system happen, this kind of nervous system intervention. That's why we describe it as a somatic experience more than anything else. And that's when your friend is screaming and shrieking. And we see a lot of that: shrieking, spitting, sometimes puking, sometimes like moving around, sometimes talking, crying, laughing, all sorts of expressions, sweating, just the whole body, just the nervous system goes and opens and finally releases some like deeply held energy that has been stuck for a very long time. Because from a very, very young age, we're taught to suppress how we feel. We're taught to suppress emotions, which are really just energy in the system. And finally, that energy gets to move. And so it's like this dramatic reset of the nervous system in a certain way. And in that opening, there's this tremendous potential, especially as you're coming back. If you're in a super safe environment, like a lot of what our work is actually providing a very safe masculine and feminine energy that is loving and supportive and just totally present with you while you're going through perhaps the most intense experience of your life. Perhaps working through layers of not working through the stories of trauma, but working through the stored energy of trauma, right?
Yes.
Like that is just flowing out of you. And as that's happening, you have the maternal, paternal sort of archetypal support of feeling like, oh, I'm not alone in this. And your nervous system can actually experience some of that while also feeling what it's like to have unconditional love, to have unconditional support. And to me, a lot of what this is this is the moment we are born, right? This is the moment we come into the world, and are we safe? And all our nervous system wants is to know that we are welcome, that we are safe. And a big part of this experience is actually that, like, it's like this rewiring and reconnecting parts of the nervous system that may have, if you didn't have emotional security growing up or emotional safety, or your parents didn't know how to say I love you or give you hugs or provide that sort of safety net, even if you grew up in a functionally safe home, a lot of people just didn't have that emotional support. This is a chance to actually rewire some of that and start to learn to connect with support, connect with people around you in a way that's very powerful. So that to us is what's happening in the ceremony. Some variation of that, and for some it's very, very calm and very, very blissful, and we sit and we meditate with them, and we're just sort of co-regulating nervous systems. I'm sure you do a lot of this in your own work, right? And other times it's quite hands-on, and we're sort of holding the person or supporting the person or holding their hand, or Austin may be like embracing them like a mama, just like, I got you, you're safe. Those types of things. Sometimes people are literally like, this huge fight response comes out of them, and they kick and they scream and they attack us. And and sometimes we're just like making sure that they're safe while that fight response gets to express itself. You know?
Totally. Yeah. The woman that I work with, she always has, 2 to 3 male bodies in this space too, especially with bigger dudes that come in. And my first experience was sort of that kind of very peaceful. And my second experience, I actually don't remember, but I was screaming a lot. And so towards the end, as I was sort of coming to and kind of integrating and preparing to leave the space, it was like, she was just saying, there was some screaming, and, if you recall it, or if you feel, remember hands on you, those were our loving hands just sort of being with you. But I was like, oh, that's so weird. I can't recall. And then it maybe took a few days to, and I don't know what the statistics are, maybe, but some people sort of have the, I don't know if you call them flashbacks, but just sort of a remembering where the kind of medicine comes on at night. I certainly, experience that, especially the second time, where then I could remember sort of my screaming coming forward, and the medicine kind of settling in a little bit more. I can even sort of feel that now as I talk about it. Anytime I talk about Bufo, I'm like, I'm there. Whoa. But is that the right word for it? Flashback?
We call them reactivations. Most people call them
Reactivation.
reactivations.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
because
you. Yeah.
what's interesting is 5-MeO metabolizes right away. It's like
Yeah.
it clears out of the system within 3 hours. So you're not
Yeah.
having any sort of drug reaction. You're literally, your subconscious is, or some part of your system is basically processing the experience. And so yeah,
Right.
oftentimes at night people have, sometimes it's this experience in the mind of being back in the ceremony, almost like a very lucid dream. Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
fully somatic release that happens
Yeah.
again. Some people it happens for multiple nights. It really depends on the quality or the type, like what happens in the ceremony for them. That
Right.
often will dictate whether they're going to have reactivations. And I'd say
Mm.
it's like, well, it just depends on the group, but sometimes it's just 1 in 4, sometimes it's
Yeah.
3 out of 4, but it's
Right.
usually 1 or 2. It's usually like 25% ish of people
Mm.
have reactivations. But the more, I would say, the more physical, the more intense trauma that you're working through,
Yeah.
especially with early childhood trauma or
Yeah.
physical trauma or sexual trauma,
Yeah.
that is going to often present as these bigger energetic waves that continue to release post
Mhm.
ceremony, like in the days and weeks
Mhm.
afterwards.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. That's really helpful. And I think when to me, ayahuasca for me, maybe you said this on a podcast, or I heard this recently, that ayahuasca is like walking into a room and rearranging all of the furniture, but you're very conscious of that. You're sort of
Mm.
doing it. And bufo is like walking into a room, flicking the lights switch on, and everything is different, but you don't really know how. And
No, I haven't heard that before. That's
okay,
super interesting, though. Yeah.
it is interesting because I think that, yeah, Bufo is sort of, to me anyway, was sort of this light switch, and it was like,
Hmm.
okay, things are different now, and this is
Hmm.
within the integration and the time. Sometimes it would be like coming up against what I thought would be a trigger, or seeing a person. It was like the wound was just cleaned out, and I was like, there's no charge here anymore, huh?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. Okay, and that was sort of with the medicine, with 5-MeO DMT or Bufo, is like, oh, I'm just different now.
Hmm.
And I can't really tell you how or why. And
Yeah.
but the connections sort of come slowly and later and
Hmm.
later. And I love this idea of the nervous system sort of expressing itself and these things just sort of moving out, but you don't need to know why. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's so hard to explain the experience because it's just sort of like, I don't know, I'm just God now. I always
Well,
have
yeah.
been, but I
I
just know on a deeper level now, and it feels like a cheat code almost to my meditation practice, to my own relationship to God. It just felt like you said, it was me before and then me after, and
Yeah.
I certainly felt that way.
That's what we mean. That's when we say it's a remembering. It's a remembering of our
Yeah.
interconnectedness to all things,
Yeah.
and our interconnectedness to love and or God or whatever we want to call it. So yeah. And what's interesting is that that experience can be deeply troubling for some people as well. Like that can be a
Sure.
very challenging, to realize you are not who you thought you were is a really disruptive experience for some people,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of people are coming because they want to feel better, or they want to, they just know they're stuck, but they didn't necessarily sign up for to see that they were God, or to see that they were one with all things, right?
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily use that language unless, like, if somebody uses that language, we use that language, but we're not here to tell you you are God or what God is or
Sure.
anything like that. Like,
Sure.
to us, honestly, the language doesn't matter, but people have these awakening experiences of realizing that, oh, like all this stuff I thought was going on isn't actually real. That could be really disorienting because you've spent so long believing the narrative you've been telling
Yeah.
yourself, and then you're forced to reckon with, then the narrative comes back as well, and you got to sort of wrestle with it for the next year or two while you're processing the experience. And that can be very challenging because the narrative wants to come back. The egoic mind has spent a long time creating boundaries about what this life is and what this life is, and who you are and who you
Yeah.
aren't, and all these things to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And that can be really disruptive. It can be really hard for people.
Yeah.
That's why we say this isn't the first step on a spiritual journey. It's like you need the more framing you've got, the more practices you have under your belt of of touching into these types of experiences, of connecting with something deeper, even if it's just practicing embodiment and being able to ground into the present moment so that you can reorient yourself quickly. All these things are super important when you're going to step into this type of knowing or this type of realization.
Yeah. And I'm curious for you as a facilitator, it is big work. I really just bow to, both you and your wife, Austin, to show up and for this assignment in life. And it's a big one.
It is.
And you see a lot and you hold a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you, you as yourself and the two of you in partnership, um, you know, get enough life force going so that you can show up to this.
Yeah.
As I can't even get the words out because I can just imagine how profound and how deep, and
Yeah.
what that has to take.
Yeah, it's interesting. 2 times a month, we have people flying from all over, sometimes all over the world, but usually all over North America, spending time and money and energy, and have been planning for a thing that they're going to come do that's going to be the most intense, most potentially disruptive, potentially supportive, potentially life-changing experience of their life. So twice a month, that's what we're doing with a group of people, and it's like this really, there's like a through those few days, I mean, all the way leading up and all the way leading out too, but those few days you're holding this responsibility. You're not holding the person holds their own responsibility, right? But yeah, there's just like you're holding a lot of energy, and we don't sleep very well because everyone's in your psyche and in your, you're just holding a lot. So it's a wild thing to do, and we do it in our home, and part of our experience is hosting. We've built these spaces in our home to be able to do this, but that's also a component of just how integrated it is with our life. So it is a lot. And so a few things that have been really helpful. One is just being really careful about the amount that we do, and we just don't overcommit. There was the first few years when demand started building, we would do 5 retreats, week over week for 5 weeks straight or something like that. And we would have these runs where it was just, I look back and I just don't even know how we did that. Yeah. And now we limit to 2 per month, which I think is really important when people are looking at where they go for ceremony. Is what is the rhythm of that facilitator, and does that facilitator have enough time to withdraw and recharge, like to keep their energy system.
Yes.
Because what you're really doing when you're doing this medicine is you're entering into someone's environment, but like you are really going to be very exposed to your facilitator's nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And like well-regulated nervous systems in facilitators is like pretty much one of the most important aspects of this whole experience. It's like,
That's
and
all
it's
there is. Yeah.
you can't really teach it. Like you can build that, but like it's really practice. And like I know you do a lot of work with, do you still work with George a bunch?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like I haven't, like just meeting, I've only met him virtually, I think, but just knowing his energy and knowing your energy, like there's just a certain groundedness that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but what I'll say is just part of it is just really being careful about how we expend our energy and how we recharge. And like I think of this work as kind of like the way a pro athlete thinks about their life is like the game is going to be short and it's going to be intense. You're going to play game, but all the time around it, that's the real work. Is like, what are you doing to stay in shape? And if you're a pro athlete, you're not drinking every night. There's a whole bunch of energy practices. You're in the gym, and we're not necessarily lifting weights every day, but we have mindfulness practices, and we are sleeping really well, and we eat super clean, and we don't drink. We don't really do any substances at all. Like, we're kind of really taking care of ourselves in that way. And I think the other thing is really learning the difference between compassion and empathy, and being able to be compassionate for someone, and to be supportive, but not to feel like you need to take on their burden and their energetic pain or whatever's going on for them. Because we work with a lot of people that are exposing a lot of their inner trauma and pain with us. And if we took everybody on as if we had to save them or something like that, or
No.
we had to feel as hard, as bad as they, or, as we had to go to those places with them, that's
Mm,
not supportive, and it's not a healthy boundary. So really learning
no.
to kind of maintain this idea that we are there to help transmute energy, to help energy will pass through us, but we're
Yeah.
not taking any of that on, you
No.
know?
No, and it's such a skill. I love what you said. My teacher always says that empathy is a poor man's compassion. It's like
Mm,
compassion is where it's at. And
yeah.
um, I'm actually leaving on Monday to go sit in silence. I just rented a little cabin on Galliano Island just to sit
Cool.
for a week alone. And I don't know what I would do if I didn't have those moments,
Yeah.
because it's so full on, once you're in. My work now is mostly just retreats. I just fly all over and lead retreats. And then my downtime is like down to a science, because otherwise I wouldn't still be standing. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you feel the same way. And how I loved what you said about, yeah, really you're stepping into the facilitator's nervous system, really. And,
Hmm.
and your central channel is what's going to hold the whole thing.
Hmm.
And to surround yourself. And yeah, George is my best friend, and I always feel the best in his presence. He's also 6'6", so he's got a whole lot of body of peace to hold.
He does. He's like a
to
gentle
hold.
giant, gentle giant.
Yeah, so I love facilitating with him because he's just such an anchor. Um, and and I'd love for you to speak a little bit about what it is to work with your wife, to work with your partner. As I shared with you, my husband and I are now embarking on our own hotel retreat center. This is what he does. He works in hospitality. I work
Okay.
in retreats. We're blending our worlds after 8
Hmm.
years. And I'm always curious when people work with their partners of
Yeah.
advice or what that journey has been like for the two of you. To me, when couples work together, it just often feels like the most obvious choice. That's what it feels like for Bill and I. It's like, duh, this is why we met. But curious if it's similar for the two of
Yeah.
you.
It just sort of happened. I think it's, when I look at the two of us, this work, what's happening here wouldn't be possible without that combination.
Yeah,
We really form into a single entity that has all these different components. So you take like the core, this like deep inherent nurturing that Austin can carry, this deep energetic presence that she can hold, this sense of making people feel seen and feel loved. Like I've been
mm-hmm.
a student of that for many years, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's and she has these core components of timelessness that when you're with her, it's just this magical space. And I'm really good at communication and about like seeing, like I can just map people in a way, like I can meet them for 10-15 minutes and I have a sense like of what's going on and how I'm going to be able to connect with them, and what's the
Mm-hmm.
right message at the right time, and um how to like build trust fast with people and
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right? And I'm really good at process and like a lot of the other pieces. So together that forms like a really powerful union. And um working together is, I mean, it's like we live and breathe this work,
Yeah.
literally. Our daughter's 25. She just got married. So we're in a bit of a different state. If we had little kids, I don't know that we could do this work either at
Yeah.
this level,
Yeah.
but it's really beautiful. And the advice is like, I don't know what the advice is. I think it's just, you have to be really humble. And it's really funny. Austin and I are both, we approach things quite differently. Like we have quite a different approach, which is
Yeah.
the gift of, when we put those things together. And we have very similar shared values at the core,
Yeah.
which is makes any type of tension or any time, like naturally as partners, you're gonna have fights and you're gonna be working through stuff all the time.
Sure.
But with a set of core values and really clear on those, that makes it a lot easier. One of the things that we also agreed on years ago, like 3-4 years ago, we realized that this whole project is born out of our love, like out of
Mm.
the kernel of our relationship. Like that's the seed of
Yeah.
this project. And so if this project gets too tenuous or it becomes too challenging as business partners, or as if that's going to break our relationship, then it goes first.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
so we just agreed that like we're going to do this thing, and if we reach a point where it just isn't working in that regard, we haven't reached anything like that, but if that we just always keep that in the back of our mind, like this doesn't work without the relationship underneath
Yeah.
it. So don't allow this to get in the way of us connecting on as life partners first, you know.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that love is the primary, and it's like another child, that you two have created and
Yeah.
nurtured, and I'm curious about the land. We're in this big process of finding land, and we just spent 5 weeks in Mexico, and um, I'm curious to the role the land plays in the work that you do.
I think this project again is also just the first night we got here. So we bought this property assuming that we were going to renovate a little suite for ourselves, and 3 months later we were going to move to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very first night, I feel like the land spoke to us. The land said, "You're going to host psychedelics here." And that started with some mushroom ceremonies and some other things we did for a while until we felt ready to step into the world of five. But the land kind of swept us up and just reoriented our whole lives. So not only did it, even if psychedelics hadn't been a thing, it reoriented me away from the idea of going back to New York. Like we had an apartment in New York and we were spending a lot of time there, but no, it was time to heal my nervous system and to shift the pace of my life and to reorient myself. And the land did that as soon as we got here, like this place. And what's super interesting is that I didn't even really remember this, but when we bought this property, I had friends from high school being like, "Man, you've been talking about Bowen Island forever." And it wasn't in my consciousness that was true. I knew for a couple of years I'd heard about Bowen, and we had stayed in a few Airbnbs, and I realized how close it was to the city, but how remote. Like it's like this magical combination of being the middle of nowhere, but an hour from the airport kind of thing, you know? And so I knew I had sort of put that together, but I didn't remember that I've been talking about Bowen Island. Like this has been destined for decades. It just, but I'm talking out loud and I'm not listening to myself, or at least when I was younger, a lot of that. So it was kind of curious that this land has been calling me. Bowen Island has been calling me forever. And then when we moved here, we didn't even know this until we moved here, but Austin's dad like grew up here, spent his summers here. As soon as we got as soon as we got here, a few months later, her dad was sitting next to another guy. They were getting on a cruise, and this couple was getting off a cruise, and they were sitting there chatting. And then they realized, oh, we're like, I know you, you look familiar. They knew each other from when they were like 5 years old, living on Bowen, and that happened months after. And they were like best friends here on the island.
Wow.
And so it's just like this curious connection with this place.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been interesting because we're expanding our property and we're investing a bunch right now. And that came with a lot of working through money trauma and like just believing in yourself trauma. Like, you know, if we build it, will they come? You know, like is anybody like, do people really see me? That kind of energy. And in that process, though, we also said, well, if we're going to invest all this money expanding our property here, what else? And we looked everywhere in the world. You know, we looked all over Mexico. We looked in Costa Rica. We looked in Europe. We looked like further south. We looked East Coast Canada. We looked kind of everywhere. And ultimately, it's like, no, this is the place. So it does feel like we're very rooted here, and that the environment we're in plays a big role in what's happening here. And it's amazing how often the eagles are flying over our property during ceremony, and just how often like we feel that connection with this place. So it's a huge part of what we're up to. What's that been like for you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I relate so much to everything you're saying, and really on the, we're in that place of, well, we think we're going to go back to see this land again. But yeah, we're in the investment zone. We're in the, do we have what it takes to do this? And all these interesting synchronicities that aren't actually that interesting. Life's just like,
Yeah.
hello, pay attention to me. This is just alignment. It's actually not that weird. I'm always like, wow. And it's like, my teacher's always like, no, it's not. It's actually, it's normal. It's just normal that the universe is speaking to you in these signs. But something with in terms of land and where we want to be is, as we view pieces of property or walk the property, I'm just sort of, my husband's talking biz over here, and I'm kind of just sitting and having a conversation with the land, and not so much imposing this is what we want to do with you, but what would you have us do, and seeing the land as the third partner in what we're up to is my husband, myself, and the land. And I do think that some land wants to be left untouched and raw, and some land wants to be the other healer and kind of do the work. And so that's sort of where I've pointed my focus on is what is the piece of land that is ready to do work with us. And I have really deep reverence for Temescal, which is the Mexican sweat lodge. And we did a couple when we were there. And if anyone doesn't know what that is, you basically sit in this little hut with rocks that have been in a fire for hours and hours, and they pour water on them, and you're in the pitch black, and a shaman leads you through prayers and songs. It's so beautiful. There's no quote unquote medicine. You're not ingesting anything, but the darkness and certainly the heat are the teachers. And every time I've been in there recently, I just keep having this vision of this man, this shaman who sits across from me. It's just a vision. It's not the actual person that's in there. And he keeps just saying, I'm waiting. I'm ready for you. And I just think he's just a guide. And I know it when I'll see it. And I just have a feeling I'm going to meet this medicine man. And because it's important to me as a white person going into purchasing land, that we're really involving our community and involving ancient ritual, pre-Hispanic rituals that I have such deep reverence to and for. So it's all of the things combined, and big double clicking on the money trauma and do I have what it takes to do this trauma? But that's been really cool because I'm sure you guys know too. It's like every time you want to do something, you can do it. The money, you figure it out. You figure it out, and there's never a time where we haven't figured it out. It might be not be on our timeline. Certainly.
You have to just trust. And that the timeline piece is really interesting because I think a big part of being here is like we had a totally different plan. We actually didn't plan to buy any type of property like this. We went by this property 10 times looking at every other property. And then we said, oh, well, let's just check it out. And literally 3 days later, we put an offer in. It was so obvious, but we had to really stretch to make that happen. But then also the property has changed dramatically, but you need to spend time on the land to sort of feel out where things are going to go and what's the natural, where's the path? Like the path is that way. It's not, what's the natural flow of energy and everything on this island. And there were some buildings on the property, but a lot of them were unfinished. So we could have kind of done whatever we wanted with them, but it takes a while to know why you would do something with. So it's just taken years. Like we've been in construction and ongoing shifts around this for the last 8 years. We had to reframe early on, and because I was actually started freaking out when we in the first year, thinking I was going to do all this crazy stuff, and I don't know what I was thinking, but Austin helped slow things down and say this is a 10-year project. Let's just start describing it as the 10-year project. And that was super helpful, and since then that's just been our running mantra. This is a 10-year project. And then the next 10 years will probably we may be here another 50 years, but it's a 10-year project to get it to the first layer of our vision of this property. And we're at year 8, and we're adding 2,000 square feet to one of the buildings right now, which is a major addition. And that'll probably be the last big lift, but who knows? We're insane. So maybe not.
Same. I mean, I think we have to all be insane to want to do these things, but on some level, or naive, or I don't know. I mean, I felt really naive when I opened my studio. I had a yoga studio for years in Vancouver and closed it. And, but I was 25, 26. So I felt like there was a lot of naivety going into running a business. And now, whatever, 10-ish years later, I feel there's still a naivety here. I have a little bit more of an understanding, but I kind of love that. I love that I
Yeah.
that yeah, there's just this big piece of me that loves walking into the unknown and all
Yeah.
the lessons you're going to learn along the way. And
Entrepreneurs are, yeah.
yeah.
Entrepreneurs are inherently naive. You have to be inherently,
Yeah.
you have to inherently just like not see the risk in front of you. Otherwise,
You wouldn't do it.
otherwise you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You got to be
Yeah.
a little bit crazy. It's
Yeah.
all good.
And I love this idea of the 10-year project, because
Hmm.
we have people that say to us, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to be at your first retreat like next year." I'm like, "Honey, no. It's not we are not going to be open in 1 year." I mean, you can come camp on the land maybe
I
in
was going
one
to say
year
there's going
for
to be
now.
tents. It's going to be a
Yeah.
tent retreat.
Which will be I can't wait for that either. But I think yeah, the longevity and looking at it, really the legacy is something I've always sort of oriented toward, is the legacy of the work and what you're leaving behind. And
Yeah.
I think I'm so inspired by people that take these massive risks and do it together in partnership. And we are currently, well, we don't live anywhere right now, but our stuff is dropped in New York because we were in New York for a couple of years, and we've
Yeah.
been back for a few months, or I don't even know, a month. And I hear you on the nervous system. That's really what's I love the city. We were in Greenpoint. I love
Oh
Brooklyn.
yeah.
I love our
Greenpoint's
friends
awesome.
there, but
Yeah.
I need way more
Hmm.
quiet and stillness and
Hmm.
connection to the land. So that's where we're heading.
Cool.
But I would love at some point, I've been sort of following what you guys have been up to since it
Hmm.
came on my radar. And so how do people find out about the work you do, or apply? Or I'm sure there's some people listening to this and going, that's scary. I'm not ready for that. But I'm sure there's actually lots of people who are. So what does that process look like?
Yeah. Well, our website is enfold.org, enfold.org. So we have tons of information up there. A lot of our information is just behind. You have to log in for. You just create a free account. You just fill out a little form. It's mostly just for a bit of privacy around some of what we do. But we're very transparent about all the things and how it works. And one thing I also just really encourage people is there's lots of obvious links to book a discovery call. And even if you're just curious, like one thing I'll say is that if you talk to me or you talk to Jesse from our team or someone from our team on a discovery call, for us, those are about education, about getting to know one another. They're not about selling anything. Like for
Yeah.
us, it's really clear when somebody feels called,
Yeah.
then they're ready. And
Yeah.
but oftentimes, like if you want to just book a discovery call and chat with someone and ask questions and just get a feel, and like we're happy to do that. A big part of our work in this space, like I said, is um, also just helping people navigate psychedelics in general. So a lot of
Yeah.
people, 1 in 5 people we talk to or who apply to come to a retreat, we actually screen out. We say, you know what,
Mm.
I think a yoga retreat might be a better fit, or go do some mushrooms, or
Yeah.
like ease in, like, or
Yeah.
maybe you could use a bit more therapy work or whatever it might
Yes.
be. We just kind of help navigate, but we're always happy to do that, as that's part of our job, is to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
help people navigate the space. It doesn't need to be navigating towards our work right away. And then also
No.
on our site, we have hundreds of resources. So we have lots of breath works and meditations and readings, and like lots of amazing stuff. We should get some of your meditations or breath works or something up on our site.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you've ever felt like sharing them, it'd be fun to put a
I
couple up.
do. Well, I am finally in a place where I'm starting to create content for myself. I've been creating content for
Everybody
um,
else,
everyone else for the last 15
good for
years.
you.
So yeah, so it feels really, really good to do that. So I'll let you know when there's more.
All good.
But I just love how you're advocating for such a holistic picture. And I hope those of you that are listening really, really hear that. It's like, it's not trying to beat all the levels until you can finally do 5-MeO. I do really feel like these things call you. And I used to always roll my eyes at that, the same way I used to roll my eyes at someone saying, when around like love. And then I fell in love and I was like, oh, they were right. And I feel the same way about these medicines. Ayahuasca found me. I was dreaming about ayahuasca, and it'd been in my world for years and years and years,
Mm,
around ceremonies. my husband used to run a hotel in Nicaragua, and they did a lot of ceremonies there. And I just was like, not for me for years. And then 3 years ago, I just kept dreaming of, I don't even know what I was dreaming. I could just
Wow.
feel this feminine presence coming in and kind of slinking in, and it was really bizarre. And I had gone actually for a hike the next morning with George. And I said, I think I'm supposed to do ayahuasca. I just keep having these dreams. But it was during COVID, so there was no travel.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I'd love to do it with women only. And I'd love to do it soon, I think, in LA. And I went to the studio that I was teaching at that evening, and I told a friend, and she said, oh, I'm doing a ceremony in a couple of days with all women, and it's in
Wow.
LA. And I
Wow.
said, oh, okay. And she said, I could ask the shaman if we could have one more, whatever. And so whatever, the rest is history. So I just think, but it took me 15 years. And I think in my ayahuasca ceremony, I had this one sort of rational thought that just said, I'm so grateful for breath work, because I was like holding on for dear life at one point of the ceremony. But I had felt those ways in breath work before, specifically like an active transformational breath work journey. And so I think if people are sort of curious, I am so grateful for my connection to breath.
Yes.
And that allowed me to go deeper into all of these other things. That would be my kind of jump off point. If those that are curious, it's like, go explore the breath, go explore the mind.
Yeah, breathwork is such a beautiful spot to start. That's why we've created lots of sessions as well. You can find those on our site, YouTube. They're on Spotify. We try to make as many of them just free and available as possible. And I know you guys do such beautiful breathwork work, and you do breathwork retreats and things like that too. So
and trainings. And you can go so deep. You can go so deep in those experiences where it's just you and the breath. And the nice thing about the breath is that if you want to pump the brakes, you can just slow the breath down. You don't always get that opportunity with psychedelics. Is like, you're in it sometimes for the long haul. You can't kind of press the eject button, but with breath work, you can kind of slow things down, which is so important. My last question for you is, and I ask all my podcast guests this question, is it's undefinable, ineffable, almost silly to try to define it, but I love just hearing people's explanation or relationship to what is God for you, or divine, or source, or however you choose to call it.
Well, first, God is love. And love and God are, to me, just a sense of, it's like a very interestingly simple thing of just feeling exceptionally connected to the present moment, to everything around you, to being in complete acceptance of what is, and to know that there is no such thing as alone.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. That's why I love asking that question.
That's a good question.
It's just, it feels to me like the only question some days.
What's your answer today? Can I ask you what your answer is today?
Oh, no one ever asks me. Thank you. I think it's in the breath I just took. To me, it's just what's in the air. And it's me, and it's you, and it's in the conversation, and it's in the we're in different places in the world right now, but it's the way I can feel your heart, and I know that you can feel mine. It's the meeting place. Yeah, it's the meeting place. And I thank you for this conversation. I always feel like with podcasts, like I could sit here all day long.
I know.
Because we have so many things to talk about, and I know we'll get the chance to do that again. And I really hope I know I will get to meet you in Austin at some point. Deep gratitude for the work that you do in this world, and for anyone that's taking big risks and bringing forward their wisdom and gift with their own unique essence, it's big. It's big. Not everyone has the courage to do it. So just bowing to the courage and what it takes to show up. And thank you for bringing this medicine to the world. I just think it's certainly one of the biggest things that I can point to that's changed my life. So I love that you're
Thank you,
doing it in
Ally.
such an integrative way, in such a high integrity way. So
Hmm.
thank you for that.
Thank you, Ally. And I would say the same
Mm.
about you. I hear from so many people in how you've touched their lives. Like it's just a pretty constant thing. So it's really amazing what you do in the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve. And yeah, go check out Steve's work. And I'm so excited to just see what you continue to do after the
Yeah.
10 years, to the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Okay.
Thanks, Ally.
Thanks, Steve.